Yes, I am. This presentation corresponds to the work that I'm currently doing at the Novgorod State University in Veliki Novgorod. And originally, I am already in pension from the University of Perugia in Italy. My city is Terni. Then I am normally commuting between them. I don't want to show the surroundings because I am not in Veliki Novgorod. I am not in Terni now. I am in Alicante in Spain, having holidays with my wife. Then I, I don't want to show the window because I don't think that is too scientist. Okay, but let's go on this presentation. And I will start a little bit far because I really, as a scientist, I am always very worried about the positions, some political positions about neglecting what is going around. I am not saying that microplastics are really so dangerous, but on the other hand, we cannot avoid talking about our impact on the world that we are living. And I think this is something that we should start talking in the schools. This is the representation of the CO2 concentration in the atmosphere in the last 400 million of years. And you can see that there has been a big changes in the CO2 concentration. And obviously this was not done by man. This was done by nature. That was normally about all the cataclysm and all the changes that we have had during our lives in the last 400 million of years. But let's concentrate on what is going on since man is on the earth. And we took the last 40,000 years. That is when man really started to differentiate and to be really a cultural man, to do some culture. Some people say that, for example, the capacity to talk started maybe 170,000 years ago. Then that corresponds to the man that we know now. Obviously, the last 10,000 years are about the history, but we have that. And we have been living with a concentration between 200 and 250 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. But what happened in the last 150 years? This concentration has died. And this cannot be nature produced. This is man produced. Then we are responsible for what are we doing. I am not saying that CO2 will answer all the problems that we have, but I am worried about the next generations because some changes could be produced by this CO2 and not only the greenhouse effects. Then I think that as a scientist, we are responsible for what we do, for the technological advancements. We need to put more science in knowing what are the impacts that we are producing in our world. Obviously, we work on plastics, and we know that plastics can also impact a lot. But we have the United Nations, and okay, United Nations is a very powerful institution. The 17 objectives of the United Nations for 2030 and in 2015, and many of them have to do with this impact of our activities in the world. But I am really very worried because this was the statement of United Nations in 2015. And I would like to read it because it really is very important. We resolve between now and 2030 to end poverty and hunger everywhere, to combat inequalities within and among countries, to build peaceful, just, and inclusive societies, to protect human rights and promote gender equality and to empower more women and girls, and to ensure the lasting protection of the planet and its natural resources. Already 10 years have passed since this declaration and nothing happened. We are worse than 10 years ago. Then really, it is a responsibility of any one of us and inhabitants of this world to do something to improve the quality of life, not only for us, but mainly for the next generations. And talking about plastics, this is the current situation. This is in Philippines, in Luzon. just outside, but the same you can see maybe in Bombay or maybe around some cities in Brazil. And then really there is a situation that needs to be addressed. And okay, maybe there is some exaggeration talking about the seas of plastics in the oceans, but really there is a concentration of plastics. And it's incredible that WWF has declared that between 2050 and 2060, if we continue dumping the quantity of plastics that we are putting in the oceans, the quantity of plastic will be, the mass of plastic will be higher than the mass of fishes. I checked that because I thought that really was completely false, but unfortunately not in quantities of megatons of fishes that are available for fishing. We will start to be higher quantity of plastics than that. Then we need to do really something. And it's not only in maybe in some countries in Asia or in Africa. Our Mediterranean Sea is the most polluted sea talking about plastics and talking about microplastics. Okay, again, United Nations is doing something about that because there is an intergovernmental negotiation committee on plastic pollution. This is very important action because almost most of the countries of the world are participating in the meetings. They started in Punta del Este, Uruguay in 2022. And the last meeting was the number 5 in Korea in November, December last year. The problem is that they wanted to have a declaration, and this declaration was not possible to be by the participants. There were very opposite positions. Some of them were defending the plastics industry, some of them were defending the environment, but there were almost no possibility to have only one decision. The next meeting will be in Geneva in August this year, and we have participated with Sergei Liulin in a side event last month to continue talking about microplastics. The main problem for this declaration is that one of the drafts that circulated in Korea, for example, had the banning of plastics by 2050. Then imagine if we ban completely plastics in our culture, in our technologies, will be something directly impossible to manage. And as I said, more than 2,500 delegates participated. It's interesting, but I checked some delegations. For example, the Italian delegation have not representatives from the polymer science research. Russia has a full delegation, almost 40 people, with the different representatives. But France, for example, has again no representatives from polymer science. Spain, the same. Then we have a problem of underrepresentation of the polymer science people in this delegation. And then it's impossible to have a declaration that can have all the aspects, all the scientific aspects. And polymers, as I said before, are part of our culture, are part of our technology. We are producing in the world about 400 megatons of plastics per year. And is comparable with what we do on steel or in wood, then really it will be impossible to think that we cannot have plastics anymore, because the quality of our life will be really back at least 200 years. But the main problem is, for example, we have these 400 tons produced per year. Now it's 450 for 2024, but only the recycling is only 10%. Then only 10% of the plastic that we produce is recycled. An alternative could be the biopolymers, bio-based polymers and biodegradable polymers. But these are really a teeny part. It's less than 1% of the plastic, about 0.5%, 0.5% of the production of polymers. Then is really we cannot change the situation only by recycling or producing biodegradable polymers. This is exactly the situation where the main part is the mechanical recycling of polymers, but there are also other possibilities. For example, the energy recovery. Nowadays, energy recovery is still higher than the recycling of the plastics. And this really, we will not open the discussion about the energy recovery. It could be a solution to eliminate the polymers, the plastics from the environment. But really, from the point of view of the CO2 production, we are not helping a lot with this energy recovery. I'm talking a little bit about Europe. Europe also is doing something about microplastics. There is a declaration in 2021 in order to reduce by 30% the microplastics in 2030. Microplastics is one part of the problem. It's all the parts that have less than 0.5 centimeters, less than 5 millimeters. And this is, okay, I will talk about these problems later. There had been a lot of interest about microplastics in Europe between 2018 and 2023. Unfortunately, in the last 2 years, there has almost no news about the problems. And the main things that we have till now are, we can see some REACH restrictions addressing intentionally added microplastics, for example, in cosmetics, or incredible, but regulations on preventing pellet losses, because one important part of the contribution of the microplastics is the losses in the transport of the pellets of plastics. And there are also some regulations coming on different industrial sectors, like, for example, on pneumatics or in the marine strategy or in fertilizers. Then some activities are going on regulation, but really are not going to solve the problem. Then we have as a first conclusion of this introduction, the necessity to have some limit on the use of plastics, mainly where they are not really increasing, importantly, our quality of life. For example, the use of one single-use plastics, like some application in cosmetics or in beverages, in cups, things that will be used only one time and then we will throw up. Really, these are not contributing too much to our quality of life, be limited or eliminated from our use. One thing that, for example, cannot be think about limitation is in food packaging, because food packaging by plastics have eliminated a lot of illness, a lot of epidemics. Then we cannot come back when I was a child that I was having just things in the hand or in paper. Then plastic really is helping the quality of life. Again, this is just an example. Then we would like also to promote research in the diffusion of the microplastics and really studying about the effects in human environmental health to put more science in this analysis. And also we need to inform the consumers from the school, from the childhood, and include also microplastics concerns in our university curriculum. And the promotion of the use of biodegradable polymers also can help, but again, we need more scientific approach on the use of biodegradable polymers. For example, one elementary thing, PLA, that is being used a lot as a biodegradable polymer, will biodegrade only under compost conditions. If we put bottles of PLA in the ocean, they will not degrade immediately. Then they will contribute to the problem of plastics accumulation in the oceans and to the microplastics. With these concepts, we presented together with Sergei Lyulin from the Novgorod University a mega grant proposal already last year, and that was approved. We started the project in September 2024, and is on the same title of my talk, New Strategies for Dealing with Microplastics as a Potential Threat for Humans and the Natural Environment. Was presented by the Novgorod State University, but with the participation of other Russian institutions like St. Petersburg State University, Lomonosov Moscow State University, the Institute of Macromolecular Compounds in St. Petersburg, the Institute of Obstetrics, Gynecology, and Reproductive Medicine in St. Petersburg, and also the Nesmeyanov Institute of Organoelement Compounds of the Russian Academy of Science. Then we started to work already last year, and the main objectives was to have a scientific approach to assess the impact on human health in this, and also analyzing all the possible environmental matrices, water, soil, and living organisms, and using either experimental analysis, there in silico, and also, in vivo, and also in silico analysis through computer simulations. We also would like to have in this approach the interaction of the microplastics with other pollutants. And we already have some results saying that microplastics could be vehicles for pesticides, for hydrocarbons, for antibiotics, for heavy metals. And then this combination also could help in the distribution of these pollutants. Also, we need a standardization approach for the characterization of the microplastics. We have seen many papers talking about microplastics in lakes, rivers, oceans, but normally the sampling of these microplastics is not the same, and we need more standardization. One thing, for example, for this United Nations Environmental Program, I forgot to tell that there is not a common definition of plastics. For us, it's simple what is a plastic. We know what is a plastic, and we don't discuss about what is a plastic. We prefer to use polymers. But for example, for this United Nations Environmental Program, rubbers are not part of the plastics, are not part of the problem. And for us, it should be included. Also, they don't differentiate between thermosets and thermoplastics. And obviously, the fate of these different polymers is completely different in the environment. And really, we are also doing some work inside IUPAC, because IUPAC still has not recognized the word microplastics. And we don't think that just ignoring the problem, we will solve the problem. We don't want to be alarmed. I agree with Professor Yaroslav, but we cannot avoid talking about microplastics and having the real dimension of the problem. And we recognize that microplastics are mainly produced by degradation. Then these are called secondary microplastics. And then we need to study still better the degradation of the polymers in the different environmental matrices. Obviously, it's not the same if it is in the air, it is in water, or in soil. And then this degradation phenomena will produce the reduction of the dimension. And then we are going to the main problem for us, that is, it's not the same a particle that is 5 millimeters that a particle that is less than 100 nanometers. Obviously, the problem is completely different. Then we cannot have only one classification of microplastics for particles that are lower than 5 millimeters. We need to address the problem of the nanoplastics and the submicro and the micro. And finally, we need to put more efforts in biodegradable polymers, but we need to check really how the biodegradation and how the biodegradation will help to at least reduce the problem of these microplastics. Now I go very fast on the description of the project. As I said before, we have the 3 different matrices, that is water, that is soil, that is living systems. In the case of the living systems, I can tell you that we are concentrating on the problem of the presence of microplastics in pregnant women, and in order to check if could be any kind of effect. We have already done all the preparatory for the sampling and for the treatment of the samples in order to determine the presence of the microplastics and eventual interactions of the microplastics with the cells. And our preliminary results are in the direction that really we have not found any evidence about the toxic effect of the microplastics, but it's still early to have a definitive conclusion. And in the case of soil, for example, we have already some papers about the use of polymer capsules in order to have the release of fertilizers in the soils. This are normally being used in commercial systems, and we have some results about the use of this slow release of fertilizers in soils in Russia, and we have found that this is one of the main origins of microplastics in soils, and also that these microplastics interact with the presence of heavy metals in the soil. And also we will analyze not only this, but also the interaction with pesticides, antibiotics, and hydrocarbons. And in the case of waters, we have working in different lakes and rivers, mainly in Russia, and we are using this time for the standardization of the analysis, and I will talk a little bit later on that. This is from the experimental point of view, and for the modeling point of view, we have all the possible simulations about the interaction of the microplastics with different substances and also with living systems. And I will show you it immediately. Then in the next 5 minutes, I will describe the work done in the different partners of the project, starting from St. Petersburg State University, and the group at the Department of Chemistry that is led by Ivan Zorin is mainly working in, say, standardization of the characterization systems, also different measurements, NMR, FTRR, Raman, and all the possible spectroscopies, but also in the synthesis of model particles. Then we think that in order to study the microplastics, the best thing is to generate our own microplastics by synthesis of microspheres normally, and not only spheres, because also we have included the form and the geometry of the particles in our study. And obviously also the isolation of some primary particles, like for example from cosmetics, detergents of paints. This is the part of the synthesis. Really is already the group has very good experience in having the possibility to synthesize different particles on different dimensions, and we can see here that we can go from the nanometer to the micrometer dimensions. And in the case, also this group is dedicated to the synthesis of biodegradable polymers, and in this case, using some, say, sugar sources that are local plants in Russia. This is the biomass preparation for the synthesis, and we have already some good results on the production of polyhydroxyl canoates, again using sugar sources that are local. The group at the Lomonosov Moscow State University, that the coordinator is, like say, Yaroslav, and this is mainly analyzing the physiochemical and toxic properties of some interaction of microplastics with pollutants. There is already one paper submitted about the production of microplastics from tea bags, and we are using either polymer like polypropylene tea bags or cellulose tea bags, and we have the comparison. we would like to remember that cellulose and microcellulose can also be considered microplastics, because normally our body is not able to process completely cellulose, nanoparticles and microparticles. Then in this case, we can consider this also as microplastics. Then this is the interaction of the pollutants with the microplastics. And if we want to know is this carrier effect of the microplastics are supporting the toxicity or not of the different pollutants. In the case of the characterization of the microplastics, normally in literature you will find a lot of results by infrared spectroscopy. But in this case, normally we are talking about multiple plastics. Then we need to differentiate the different signals. And in this case, machine learning methods are being used. And we have a group that is developing their own machine learning effects. I am not expert on that. And I will not answer questions about this, but I think that it is really very important that when we have so different polymers and we need to differentiate between the different signals that we obtain in multiple samples and in multiple runs of FTR, it's important to have a very strong analysis of the signals. As I said before, the aging of the plastics is one of the main origins of microplastics. Then we need to analyze better the degradation and the different possibilities of degradation of the plastics. And then in this case, obviously, UV radiation, moisture, oxygen, and temperature, and in the case of ozones, the salt level will be the main external variables that we can analyze in order to check the fate of the microplastics. This is the effect of in soils, as I said before. Then there have been different analyses in different parts of the Russian soils about the presence of the microplastics. And this is on the fertilizers. This is the work that we are doing at the Novgorod State University. And I comment already on that. And finally, the effects on the human body done at the Institute of Obstetric Gynecology and Reproductive Medicine in St. Petersburg. The idea is to find the microplastics in different biological material from patients, mainly about pregnant women. Obviously, in this case, we need to have all the preparation for the protocols that are by sure they need to respect mainly the patients. And then we are already in the analysis of the first results about this possible toxicity. Regarding the modeling, mainly, you know, Sergei Lulin is a reference for the dynamic simulations using different computational techniques. And all the results that we are obtaining experimentally, we are trying to analyze from the computational point of view. Then there are several groups working on this coarse-grained modeling approach in order to check either the interaction of the polymers with different pollutants, but also the interaction of the polymers with the cells. I will show, sorry, I will go fast here. We have the different possibilities like plasticizer, photostabilizers, flame retardants, pigments. There are many possibilities for the interaction of the microplastics. And obviously, as I said before, the interaction of the microplastics with cell. In this case, obviously, we are talking about nanoplastics, because in order to have the interaction with the cell wall, we need to have this nano system. And this is the reason that we need to differentiate between the nanoparticles and the microparticles. We will have our first results by the end of this year, and we will have still to work together in 2026 in order to complete the first part of the project. And we hope that through this approach, we can develop a research center at the Novgorod State University that could be a reference for the whole country, and not only for Russia, but also for the rest of the world. We organize every year a conference. With the first two were in Novgorod, and the next one will be in October 2024-2025 in Samarkand in Uzbekistan. Then you can find this information in internet. The web place is www.microplastics.ru, and I hope that we can meet some of you in Samarkand for this exciting conference. And this is the photo of the second conference in Novgorod in October last year. We have a very nice attendance and a lot of discussions. And I would like really to acknowledge the work of Sergei Lyulin, that is together with me in this photo, for all the efforts and in helping me to coordinate this mega grant project. Thank you very much.